So now that you're familiar with Xcode itself, you're fast becoming a Swift expert, it's now time to return to the iOS platform and learn how to use some of the most fundamental and generally useful aspects of iOS development. We're going to start in this video looking at navigation and menu bars. Then we'll go on to look at timers and table views, followed by permanent data storage and multiple view controllers. Then we'll see how to control the keyboard, how to download data from the web, and we'll cover some advanced string manipulation as well. Along the way, we'll be making 4 different apps, including an egg timer, a times table app, a to-do list app, and a what's the weather application. So there's a lot to cover, and by the end of this section, you should feel pretty comfortable with the basics of iOS development as a whole. One step at a time though. Let's start off our single view application and see how we can use menu bars in our apps. So I'll just call this menu bars. I'll save it as usual on the desktop. And we're going to be working here in main storyboard. And as you might guess, we're going to drag in our navigation bar from the object library down here. So if we just do a search for nav, you can see here we've got a navigation bar, and that's what we're going to be using. So let's have a look. Let's drag it in. So usually the navigation bar will go right at the top of the app. Sometimes you might want to leave space for the battery, etc. I think that's what we'll do here, but you can choose whether you do that or not. There we go. So very simple. We can change the title just as we're used to, double click on it. We can call it navbar demo or something like that. And let's have a look, see what this looks like in different screen sizes or orientations. So you can see there, it automatically stretches to the edge of the screen. We don't need to put any auto layout on it to make it behave as we would want it to. So that's great. Let's go back to our iPhone 6. So having the navigation bar is very useful, but usually we're going to want some buttons here as well. So let's search for, we can search for buttons, and you'll see here we've got a bar button item. So we can just drag that in, and let's pop it there on the left. And you can see it positions itself very nicely, and we can choose from a few options up here in the context menu on the right. So particularly, we can choose from a range of default images, icons, etc. And of course, we can play around with the color, although I personally would generally recommend leaving those as the defaults, as that's what the users would expect. But for now, we'll leave that as a nice garish pink. And if we wanted to, we could set an image to use our own custom image there instead of using one of the defaults. All right, so I'm going to set you a quick challenge which actually has very little to do with navigation bars, just to remind you how to connect buttons and other UI elements code. I'd like you to add some code to make it so that when the camera button is pressed, it prints camera pressed to the console. So when the camera button is pressed, camera pressed is printed in the console down here. Hopefully you can remember how to do that. Go for it. All right, did you manage it? Hopefully so. All we need to do is control drag from our camera button to our view controller.swift, and we're going to create an action. I'll call it camera pressed. There we go. And we just need to add the Swift code. Print. And then whatever really we want to print to the console. So let's just have a quick look. First off, to make sure that this all looks nice in the simulator itself, and secondly, to make sure that when we press that camera button, we do get a response from our app. And here we go. So let's just check. We tap on the camera, and we get camera pressed down there. Fabulous. Okay, so back to our navigation bar. We can, of course, drag in a bar button item on the right as well. And I'll leave that one as custom and change the title to Hi. So if you leave it as custom, then you can choose whatever text you want for the bar button item. All right, so that's the top menu, or the navigation menu. Down the bottom, we have a similar menu called the toolbar. So let's just drag that in. You can put these anywhere, but they are very much designed to be at either the top or the bottom of the screen. Again, let's have a little look. Yep, it looks good in other orientations and other device sizes as well. So we don't need to apply any auto layout to it. Okay, so we're given an item by default there. You can customize that in the usual way. If we want to add another bar button item, we can do so. But you'll notice that the layout is different to the top here. So the navigation bar is designed to have a title in the middle, which I'm sure we changed to nav bar demo. I must have undone that at some point. And then around the title, 2 icons. The toolbar at the bottom is generally a little bit more flexible, which means that by default the items will just go left to right, one next to the other. So if we wanted, for example, one on the left and one over here on the right, we'd have to bring in a space. So we can use a fixed space, but that's generally only useful if we know exactly the screen size of the device that we're going to be working with, which generally we don't. So more useful in most cases is a flexible space bar button item. So if we drag that in there, that will essentially stretch out the buttons to go on the left and the right. So what if we wanted 3? A button there, a button in the middle, and a button on the right? Well, we just drag in another button. So there, for example, and then if we wanted a button in the middle, we'd drag in another flexible space, and that would then stretch it out so that all 3 are equally spaced. So let's just select some different options there. So it's like we're developing some sort of mail app. And there we go. So now we're starting to build things that look like familiar apps, with things like navigation bars at the top and toolbars at the bottom. Alright, so feel free to play around with those if you want and experiment with your own layouts, particularly in the toolbar at the bottom. But we're going to be using something similar and learning how to use timers in iOS in the next video, where we'll be building our egg timer app.